those instances of police brutality and violence and killings affect people of color and Black people in particular because they are targeted. It's one thing for that to happen every so often, or for it to feel like a few bad apples. It's another thing to see it every summer. It's another thing for it to just to be happening and happening and happening again. We get tired, we feel anxious about our surroundings, we feel vulnerable. That makes us feel anxious. We're hypervigilant, we're looking around everywhere, we want to make sure we're okay. We know in some ways that it's completely uncontrollable, that we could do everything that we, to be protective of ourselves, and it still wouldn't matter. And that's hard. It's depressing. I think what is most interesting for our times now is that we know that those types of acts of violence have occurred over centuries, but now they are caught and we can see the image of it. We can watch literally some of the most traumatizing footage as early in the morning and as late at night as we want. And it definitely has an effect on the ways that we experience life, experience our vulnerability. For many African Americans, for many folks of color, and for folks who are involved in social justice actions in this country, they feel compelled to watch. So you push play because maybe you feel the guilt. You watch the video and you watch someone be tortured. And I think that part of what we're getting at in terms of why mental health is affected is that we have understood ourselves to live in a society and in a country that valued human rights and valued people. And so when we think about mental health, there are those initial reactions to that, but then there are what we call in the field secondary adversities. So secondary adversities are things that we do to cope with trauma or things that we do to cope with stress, depression, anxiety. So folks often, drink. They go out and they have happy hour when they're stressed at work, right? Same thing happens when you feel the stress related to racialized trauma. Folks may engage in a number of behaviors that can be distracting and even calming or to help regulate them emotionally. That can include sexual addiction, food addiction. It can include violence, actively, the violence that one perceives, but also feeling so close to violence as a solution or as a response makes it a more ready go-to when you're feeling at your edge. I would say, number one, that you don't need to feel obligated to watch anything. I think that everyone knows, that we're all aware that there's police killings and violence. And so if you find yourself in the loop and you can't turn away and you're finding it difficult to leave the house or to feel safe, or you're questioning strangers on the street, you don't even know who they are and you're feeling threatened by them, it's time to turn away and to turn it off. The other thing is then we're not seeing it as mental illness. I think that really saddens me is to not realize that you're sick or that you're not doing well, right? To not realize that the racism in the society and in the culture is actually making you sick. The idea that you see these films, you see this imagery, and you realize that it's not a movie, that it's a real person and a real human life that is hanging in the balance in that way is quite disorienting. I think that the casualness makes us feel perhaps that vulnerability is something that's real for all of us. I'm not in any way advocating that anyone become a Luddite and not engage technology, but I think that we need to remember what technology is for and let it be about that. It's about connection, it's about information, it's about being more efficient, it's about access. When it becomes about something else, really evaluate how you're using it. And so there are lots of articles on social media and technology hygiene, and I encourage folks to look into some of that too. I am going to advocate, again, I'm a psychologist, I think people should go to therapy. I think people should engage in some therapeutic processes and practices that help them just to stay attuned and connect with who they are and where they are.